أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الحمد لله الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن نبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Uh, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this very important webinar. I am Dr. Muhammad Shahid. I am a doctor based in the UK. I work as a consultant in the NHS. I'm also a parent. I have three small children, 11, 8, and 6 years of age. And this topic about relationships and sex education, leading our children astray. Now, this is a very sensitive and yet very important topic. It's a fact of life that we cannot ignore. Also something which has got a lot of ramifications, both for ourselves and our children, our ummah and humanity at large. Of course, some of these ramifications are mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and it's one of the biggest concerns that I have as a parent, and it actually dominates a lot of the discussions that I have with my wife, family members, close family friends who are like-minded. And the question is, how do we navigate this? Of course, it needs a lot of awareness, unity, knowledge, and approaching this with wisdom. Okay, Alhamdulillah. For a moment, I thought that we cannot be heard, so I'll continue. So as I said, this is a very important topic which we need to navigate with unity, awareness, knowledge, and wisdom, and following the people who are leading us in this. Our children are very impressionable, they're very tender, and we have to get this matter right, because this is a responsibility which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have given to us, and we have to get this right, keeping Allah and his messenger and our akhirat as foremost. So we would like to begin this webinar with a nasheed, and I'm very happy to introduce brother Kabir, who is a very gifted nasheed artist, hailing from the heart of Nigeria. Alhamdulillah, very committed Muslim and a remarkable nasheed artist and songwriter. And we can find him on Instagram and YouTube under the name Kabir Vocals as well. And in just a few moments, Brother Kabir Umar will take the stage and sing a melodious nasheed for us, O Muslimin, which will inshallah resonate with all of us. And at the end of the webinar, we will also be launching his Balaghi original nasheed, Subhanallah, made in collaboration with the Balagh Academy. So, Brother Kabir Umar, please.
Okay, mashallah. The nasheed O Muslimi goes like this. Where are we heading? Our values are threatened. We have to work hard, protecting our young ones' hearts while the waiting. When the agenda penetrating, we have to work now. Safeguard this ummah, O Muslimin. Say no to filthy things. We have a deen, the right way to live, O Muslimin. Say no to filthy things. We have a deen, the right way to live, O Muslimin. We have to draw our young ones close. We have to know what's going on. Oh, we have to show them oh love, so they can trust us. Oh, we won't be lost. We won't be lost. Oh, Muslim, say no to filthy things. We have a deen, the right way to live. Oh, Muslim, say no to filthy things. We have a deen, yeah, right way to live, right way to live. Oh, Muslim, say no to LGBT. LGBT is not for us. I hope you enjoyed it.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, brother Kabir, for sharing your extraordinary talent with us. Extremely heartfelt. Alhamdulillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you on your journey, and may your voice continue to inspire and uplift the hearts of many. Jazakumullah khair, and hope to see you at the end of the webinar as well, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
And now, without much further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed speaker of our webinar today, Ustad Yusuf Patel. So Ustad Yusuf Patel is the founder of SRE Islamic, which provides advice, support, and training to parents concerned with how relationships and sex education is taught in schools, particularly at primary level. SRE Islamic has conducted over 1,000 seminars and workshops across the country since it was founded in 2008. He also established parental guidance, which aims to create a movement of confident Muslim parents who are equipped to discuss sex, relationships, and LGBTQ plus narratives with their children in line with Islamic values. He's also a father of 5 children and lives in London with his wife. So address a warm welcome to Ustad Yusuf Patel. I have never had the privilege of meeting Ustad Patel in person, but inshallah we'll endeavor to do so. So please, Ustad.
Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Wassalatu Wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad bin Abdullah Khatim al-Anbiya wal Mursaleen Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Jazakallah khair for attending this webinar. And during the short time that we have, we're going to cover just the bare bones of what the rights of parents are in schools. And in particular, obviously, we're focusing on England schools. So if you're a parent in Scotland and Wales, although we do talk about this in relation to your reality, because the law is different in all 3 parts of the United Kingdom. But I think it's really, but today we're going to focus on England, and we will have opportunities to speak about the other countries maybe at a later date. So with that caveat, I want to just make a start, inshallah. I'm going to make a start with a true or false quiz. Rather than me telling you what the requirements are in schools, I want to ask you some questions, and I want you to use the chat to say true or false. So all questions are going to be either true or false. So all you have to write into the chat is either true or false. I'll give you either a statement or a question, and then you can just say true or false, and then I'll give you the answer, and you can check how much how your knowledge is aligned with the reality of what they are teaching in school, or what the rights of parents are in school. So let's take the first question. So here we're talking about primary schools. So in primary schools, sex education classes are statutory, are legally required. Is that true or false? Sex education classes are statutory, are legally required in primary schools. So I'll wait for most people to answer, and then I'll give you the answer. So we've got a mixture of different answers in the chat, which is really good. some saying false, mostly saying false, and some saying true. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the majority are saying false, and you are absolutely correct. Sex education is not statutory in primary schools. When the changes happened in England schools in 2020, sex education was not made statutory. That doesn't mean that schools are not teaching it. That just means that schools have the option to decide whether they teach it or not. And closely linked to that first question is my second question, which also speaks about primary schools. You can withdraw your children from sex education classes in a primary school. Is that true or false? Please use the chat to either indicate true or false. So we're getting some answers in already. True, true. The majority are true. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and the answer is true. You have an absolute right under the Education Act to withdraw your children from all aspects of sex education in primary schools. And that has remained the same for a very long time. And that still remains the same. So you have absolutely the right to withdraw your children from sex education classes in primary schools. And I think sometimes when we speak to parents about this, there's some parents who are surprised by that, because they may have the assumption that you don't have the right to remove your children from sex education classes in primary schools, but you do. After the third question, in primary schools, relationships education classes are statutory, are legally required. So the subject that is statutory in primary schools is called relationships education. So let me know what you think that's true. Is that true or false? Is relationships education, are relationship education classes statutory in primary schools? Okay, we've got a number of different answers, mostly true. A couple of people saying false. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let you just have the additional time to write. Some saying don't know, true. That's fine if you don't know. And it's actually true. So the subject in primary schools, which is now statutory, has been since 2020, is called relationships education. And that covers different aspects. I'm going to talk a bit later about what that actually covers, or some of the examples of what it covers. But it's just really important for us to understand that it is a statutory subject. It's true. It's a statutory subject in primary schools that you can't withdraw from. So in primary schools, LGBTQ plus teaching is statutory in relationships education classes. So now we know that relationship education classes are statutory, but is LGBTQ plus teaching statutory in relationship education classes in primary schools? So true or false in the chat, please. I'll give you maybe 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good. A couple more seconds just for a few more people to type in. A lot of people say don't know. And actually it's fine if you don't know. And the answer is it's false. The government said when it introduced relationships education in primary schools that although they recommend that LGBTQ teaching is included within that, it's not a requirement. It's not a requirement for primary schools to cover LGBTQ families. And I'll explain a bit about that in the slide that's coming up in a short while. But I think it's really important that we know that. And that doesn't mean that a primary school won't teach it, because some schools have different pushes. There's different people and organizations and lobbies that are pushing primary schools to teach this, but it's not a legal requirement. Now we talk about secondary schools now, yeah? And question number 5, relationships and sex education classes are statutory in secondary schools. Is that true or false? We said that relationships education is statutory in primary schools, but sex education classes are not. But now we're talking about secondary schools. Are RSE classes statutory in secondary schools? A mixture of true or false. Give you a couple more seconds to answer. And it's actually true. RSE is the name of the new subject since 2020. that's included in primary school, in secondary schools, in all secondary schools. And actually, what's interesting to note here is that RSE, when we talk about relationship education in primary schools or RSE in secondary schools, this is statutory in all schools, in council maintained schools, in academies, in free schools, as well as in independent schools. So if your children go to an independent Muslim school, they also have a legal obligation to teach this. Now, how they teach it in Muslim schools is they've got greater flexibility to teach it in a way which conforms with our values. But it's really interesting to note that this is statutory in all schools. So yes, RSE is a name of the statutory subject in secondary schools. Now going on to question number 6, we're talking about secondary schools again. A parent can withdraw from the sex education element of RSE. So we said it's statutory, but are you able to withdraw from the sex education element of RSE in a secondary school? Tell me true or false in the chat. A couple of false, a couple of true. True. Okay, some said true up to a certain age. Very good. Yeah. Until the age of 16, someone said. True, false. And actually the answer to that is true. You are able to withdraw from the sex education element of RSE in a secondary school as well. Yeah. Even though it's a statutory subject, the right to withdraw from sex education still exists in law, and that hasn't changed through statutory RSE. So you can request to withdraw your child from the sex education element of RSE. Now we're going to talk about up to what age that happens. Somebody mentioned the right answer in the chat, but I want to include that now in this question. In secondary schools, you can withdraw your children from the sex education element until your child turns 15. Is that correct? True or false? Someone said 16. We're saying 15. Maybe it's another age. So true or false? Let me know. Can you withdraw your children from sex education element of RSE until your child turns 15? True or false? So someone says true. Most people saying true. Someone saying 14. Okay, that's not an option. But that's true. It's only a true or false quiz. So let's look at the answer. And actually, it's true. So you can withdraw your children when they start in year 7. Yeah. So when they roughly 11, they'll start secondary schools in England. And then when your child turns 15, if they've been withdrawn from the age of 11 until 15, from the age of 15, now your child will be told, look, you've been withdrawn for these years, for the last 4 years. Now the decision about whether you remain withdrawn is now in your hands. So either you want to remain withdrawn, or you can opt into sex education classes for 1 term during this year. So your child at the age of 15 will be given the right to decide, and that right is taken away from you at the age of 15. So going on to the next question, number 8, schools are legally required to consult with parents. Yeah, is that true? So schools are, before they teach this subject, schools are legally required to consult parents. Someone says true, false, true, false. So there's a mixture of true and falses here. And actually, it's true. In the guidance, it very clearly states that schools have to consult with parents before they start teaching RSE. The problem is that lots of schools don't do this. And so I'm going to speak about this in a little while, but it's really important to know that you have a legal right to be consulted about what they plan to teach your child because schools have been given certain flexibility, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides. Number 9. So that's the primary school and secondary school. Similarly here, we're talking about primary school and secondary school. Question number 9. Consultation means schools are required to show parents the resources, but not listen to their views. Is that what consultation actually means? Is that what consultation means? Consultation means that schools are required to show parents the resources, but not listen to their views. And while we're waiting, somebody asked an important question about Scotland, and in Scotland, the subject isn't statutory at all. It's not legally required for schools to teach it, and parents still have the absolute right to withdraw in primary and secondary schools from relationship from RSHP, which is what is taught in Scotland. And maybe we could do a session on this at some point in the future as well. And the answer to this particular question is false. Yeah, consultation means more than just showing you the resources. Yeah, consultation has to change the layout of a particular road. So a road which is maybe two-way is going to become one-way, or there'll be a link on the website which will ask for your views. Process, they will ask you questions about whether you want that to happen or not, whether you agree or not with the reasoning of the council. Now, if 95% of the people says we don't want the road to be changed from being a two-way road to a one-way road, and the council absolutely ignores that, then that's not consultation. That's just the council making their own mind up. Similarly, if a school just shows you the resources, and you say to the school, I'm not happy with this or this or this, and the school says, tough, that's not consultation. That's just showing you the resources. Consultation means more than that. Yeah. Now, the next question is also linked to consultation, but it talks about this a bit more. The government decides what resources a school must use and which year groups different topics must be taught. So in RSE, the school has to decide on resources and has to teach a particular curriculum that the government has set. But does the government tell schools you have to use this particular resource, or you have to teach this in particular year groups, or do schools have flexibility in this? And so far, we've got a mixture of true and false, mostly false, and it is false. The reality here is that schools in England have a lot of flexibility. They have flexibility over how and when to teach the subject. So how means the resources that they use. So a school can use different resources that are available on the market, or they can make up their own resources in-house in the school. Now, the year groups, the government has set a particular number of topics that a school must fulfill. But if you look at the topics, it says by the end of primary school, pupils need to know this, this, and this. By the end of secondary school, pupils need to know these things. So it's that flexibility has been made so that schools can teach this subject and recognize that the pupils at that school may be different from one school to another. But lots of schools are just implementing it the same as other schools. They're not allowing that flexibility to be used. They're not even using that consultation process to make changes. So for example, during the consultation process, if parents says, okay, this resource is okay, but I don't like these two modules because they cover too much that we believe are inappropriate. Now, a school should say, if lots of parents start to make the same point, schools should, okay, I will make the changes that you want. Yeah, that's understandable and that's reasonable. That parents are making that request and schools are responding to that. But lots of times schools are just not ignoring parents. They're saying this is statutory. We have to teach this, but that's not correct. What is statutory is teaching the subject, but not how and when you teach it. So, and I think a lot of it comes down to what parents do in terms of accounting schools, reminding schools of their responsibility, or even just conveying to schools that this subject is something that we are concerned about and we want to be included in the decision-making around. Now we're coming close to the end of this quiz and we're going to start to just round up and bring all of this together. But question number 11 says, or statement number 11 says, the greatest power parents have is to make changes to RSE is the law. So is it the law? Is the law on our side? Is the law our greatest power when it comes to engaging with schools? True or false? And kind of is not an answer. Sorry, you have to use true or false. Yeah, true or false. So I know we're talking about binary things here, and we're in the age of non-binary, but I need you to be binary, true or false. And it's actually false. The reality is, although it's important that parents understand the law and they say to schools, you need to do this and that according to the law, when parents have concerns about the way a school is teaching something, one of the problems is that in order to challenge that, if you want to challenge what a school is doing, you have to take them to court. That's an expensive and slow process. And there have been recent cases where parents have taken the school to court if cases that are very strong. Like there was one case of a Christian mother who took the school to court because her child was being forced to take part in a pride march in a school, and she said that went against her religious belief, which is a part of the Equalities Act, is a protected characteristic. Now the school argued, no, we're not. We haven't infringed upon your rights. So he went to the courts, and the court went. They listened to the case, and they found in favor of the school. So here we're saying that the legal route is not always the strongest route that we have as parents. So what is our strongest position? And this is, it says, if parents knew their collective power, the power, when parents come together and raise concerns collectively, they would be more confident in approaching schools. What do you think? Is it a statement? Do you think it's true or false? Do you think if parents knew their collective power to come together and raise concerns about what's being taught in schools, they'd be more confident? And actually, that is, I believe that's true. In cases where parents have made changes in schools, it's not been the case that they've taken the school to court or they've done anything other than just say, us 50 or 60 parents are really concerned about what you're teaching in this particular area. We're concerned about this particular teaching resource. We're concerned about you bringing this outside speaker into the school. We're concerned about this, this, and this. When parents have come together with a clear and a demand from a school to change something, most of the time schools have responded in a favorable way. At the end of the day, most schools want to have a good relationship with parents. They want to have a good relationship with parents. They don't want to have a conflict with parents. And so it's really important that we articulate our concerns, but also we articulate our concerns, but also have parents in numbers behind that concern. So if you've got one parent who's saying, I don't like this, school can easily ignore that. But if you're 40 or 50 parents, school can't easily say, no, that's just a fringe element within the school. Now you've got a bargaining power to engage in a discussion with the school. So it's really important that parents come together and recognize they have that power. And it's our superpower as parents that we still haven't really understood and we haven't used enough. And we're not talking about creating disruption in schools. We're not talking about creating conflict in schools. But what we're talking about is parents making clear that we are the primary educators of our children in Islamically, but also in law. In law, parents are recognized as the prime educators of their children, and we have the right to make clear what our views are. And we expect the schools to also listen to some of our views and implement them. What's really important to note is that during consultation processes, you may have 10 different requests for the school to make changes to things. Now, the school won't necessarily make all those 10 changes. But if the school doesn't make any changes, then the school's not listening. School might make 2 or 3 of those changes. But I think really, I think going on to the next set of slides, I'm going to explain this in more detail. There's 4 areas in a school where issues are where there could be some issues around what they are teaching in schools. Yeah, and that's in relationships education, in health education, which is part of the same subject, which was made statutory in 2020, sex education, which is not statutory in a primary school, and science. Yeah, so I just want to go through this in very brief, as a brief summary. So, for example, different types of families can be taught as part of the curriculum requirement in statutory relationship education, which says pupils should know by the end of primary school that others' families, either in school or in the wider world, sometimes look different from their family, but that they should respect those differences and know that other children's families are also characterized by love and care. So in this particular instance, they might be talking about some families have 2 mums, some families have 2 dads, and things like that. But here, I think what we're going to say is that if a school is really just emphasizing just 2 mums and 2 dads, then we've got to question that. Why is it you're focusing on that? Because families can be different in many ways. Some families may be raised by their grandmother and grandfather because the parents have passed away. Some families may be raised by a single mother. Some families may be raised in blended families where a mother and father, where the child's original mother father don't raise them, but maybe the mother or father have remarried, so they live in like a blended family. But what schools do is that they focus on LGBTQ above and beyond every other difference. And we've got to say, why are you doing that? Where's the basis in law, or where's the basis in any any argument that has forced you to start to focus on this above every other family type. But also what we've got to do is say to schools, if you do mention that one type of family type is a family that may have 2 mums and 2 dads, which is a small minority of families. There's probably 0.05% of the population that has that type of family structure. But even if you do, yeah, you need to do that in a way which is factual and not imposing your values upon our children by saying, wouldn't you like to have 2 mums and 2 dads? So you can't go beyond the factual. So we've got to really pay attention to this and ask, how are schools interpreting this particular aspect of relationships education, of the relationship education curriculum? Secondly, I'll give you a couple more examples in statutory relationships education. In one of the resources is called Jigsaw. This is one of the top 3 resources that are being taught in the country, and it's really important you go to your children's school and ask, what resources are you using in our school? Yeah, and to view those resources, because you've got the absolute right to view the resources that they're going to teach your children. But one of the requirements of the relationship education curriculum is that people should know by the end of primary school what a stereotype is and how stereotypes can be unfair, negative, or destructive. And in this, they start talking about gender stereotypes. For example, they say some children, some boys don't like blue, and they don't like to play football. Some girls don't like pink, and they don't like to play with dolls. And so we should recognize that children have different likes and dislikes that may not be in alignment with other boys or other girls, but you shouldn't discriminate based upon that. Now, there's a particular resource called Jigsaw, as I mentioned. It takes this particular requirement to talk about stereotypes that are unfair or negative or destructive, and then it starts to talk about transgenderism. So it talks about from gender stereotypes, it segues, it connects to a discussion about 2 people who were men who then identified as women and went through surgery to become men. And so the problem with that is that there is no requirement in primary schools to talk about transgenderism. And so what that means is that if schools are using this resource, they are including a non-statutory element of teaching in a statutory subject, which you can't withdraw from. So we really need to question schools that are doing this and saying this is not appropriate. This module is not appropriate to be taught to primary age children, because transgenderism is not, we shouldn't be teaching children about change who you are from a man to a woman or woman to a man. That's not really gender ideology. So-called gender ideology is not something that schools should be advancing to children. Another aspect of that is that lots of schools are teaching, and sometimes in year 1 or year 2, they are talking about this. There's an aspect of the relationship education curriculum which talks about differences, that talks about appropriate and inappropriate touch, which is about safeguarding children from abuse. And all of us would say that it's important that children are aware and are safeguarded from abuse. Absolutely. But is it necessary that some schools are interpreting this requirement to mean we've got to teach children at the age of 6 names of their sexual body parts: penis, vagina, vulva, anus, all of these things. We believe it's absolutely inappropriate to raise this issue with children at such a young age, and get them to start thinking about this under this guise of saving them from abuse. There are ways of making them safe from abuse in ways that don't need to stoop to understanding or naming their sexual body parts. I remember I was speaking to a mother just the other day, and she was saying, look, my daughter was taught this, and she keeps mentioning like these names of body parts in situations that is embarrassing, and because she heard this and the school taught it in such a way to say this is something really important I'm teaching you. Now her daughter is now just a 6-year-old daughter is saying these words in inappropriate settings, and she says, look, this is really I'm really unhappy about it with the school. I complained, but the school just really didn't do much about it. So we need to really push back against this idea that children at this age need to be learning about the sexual body parts. Even in science in a primary school, that's not a requirement in primary aged classes in a primary, as part of the primary curriculum, science curriculum. And so we've got to push back against that and ask schools, why are you teaching this? And get them to justify why they're teaching the names of the sexual body parts, even though it's not spelled out in this particular requirement from the government It's not spelled out that schools have to teach this in that way. And then things like science, just very briefly to understand things around science. You know, in primary schools, like in year 5, they've got to describe life process of reproduction in some plants and animals. Now, some schools will start to say, okay, because it says plants and animals, we consider human beings to be animals, yeah? And therefore, we're going to teach about human reproduction as well. And that's not what the science curriculum sets out. In a primary school, that's not a requirement. In secondary school, that's where they start to talk about human reproduction. But for children in year 5 who could be 9 or 10 years old, it's inappropriate for them to be subjected to discussions around human reproduction at that age. Similarly, in science, there's a requirement to talk about the changes that children experience in puberty. And actually, it's really important that we teach our children this, because going through puberty is the first sign of becoming a man or a woman, because it's about becoming mukallaf, becoming accountable. The responsibilities that you didn't have before because you were considered a child, you have now. So now your book of accounts are open in front of Allah as you go through puberty and fully develop. And therefore, it's a very important stage of development for Muslim children. But in terms of the way they'll teach it in schools may be inappropriate. They may show images of males and females that are naked, that some resources do show. They may start to talk about some inappropriate things about children touching themselves, which is completely inappropriate in a science class. And that's not what the requirement states. Children should just know that when they start going through puberty, maybe hair will grow in certain places, maybe their voice will deepen, maybe some parts of their body will develop, but that's all. They don't need to go into anything else, any other detail besides that. And the resources they use to cover this is not fixed in stone, but should be appropriate to the age that these children are at. And in health education, similarly, they're going to talk about puberty, adolescent changes in adolescent body, and therefore about menstruation and things like that. But just make sure that schools are not going above and beyond what is required in the actual health education outcomes. Now, very briefly, because I want to leave some time for questions and other things. The most effective actions that I have found over the years that parents can do, first was understand what you can change. So if you can understand what you can change, that means you know the boundaries in which you can call for different changes in schools. If you say, I don't want RSE to be taught in schools, that's not appropriate. That's not, the school's going to say, well, we have to teach this. But if you say, I want you to change this part of the resources that you're planning to teach, or I want you to teach this particular resource in a later year group, then that's absolutely reasonable and fine. So try and change what is most dangerous. So for example, if the school is using inappropriate resources, if the school is bringing an outside organization into the school that is not like, for example, Stonewall or diversity role models, or an organization which just really has a very one-sided view of LGBTQ, then use that and focus on those things which have the greatest impact or danger upon your children. Ask lots of questions. It's really important. I'm going to talk about this in the last and final slide that's coming up next. Asking questions firstly shows that you are concerned about the subject, but it also forces a school to start thinking about what it's doing, how it's teaching the subject. Yeah, and so it's really important to ask lots of questions. Work with other parents. We said that the greatest superpower of parents is that collective parent power that we have, that working together to achieve change collectively is one of the most important things that we have. And really, one thing that we can't downplay, and it's really the most important thing here, is always make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us, to give us the strength to be able to advocate on behalf of our children, protect them, safeguard them, enjoin what this is essentially the actions that we're doing when we're engaging with schools as part of the Islamic act of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, enjoying the good and forbidding the evil. And so this is a meritorious act, an act which has a huge significance in Islam. And so we want as much help as we can. And the one who has the ability to help is our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who can move mountains. So if we are not and as a wider action of making dua for our children, for their istiqamah, for their steadfastness, for their guidance, for all of those things, it's really important that we make constant and consistent dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to safeguard and protect our children. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of our children and safeguard them and make them people who, when we die, and they make dua for us, and our status with Allah is increased, our status in Jannah is secured through their sadaqah jariyah, through their acts that we leave behind through them and through their dua for us. Finally, just very briefly, I've just put together just today a list of questions that I think that we can ask schools. Yeah, for example, what consultation exercises have you undertaken with parents like me? Schools are not doing consultation as they should do. Yeah, and so asking the question is really important, and it's really important. I speak to parents all the time who say, "Look, my the consultation was done in 2020. My children started the school in 2023, just this September." I went to the school and said, "Have you done consultation?" "Yeah, we did it 3 years ago." The guidance that the government created states that consultation is not a one-off exercise, that schools should be doing it regularly because there are new pupils entering the school, new parents entering the school. And so it's not just a one-off exercise. So we've got to demand that they do consultation as an ongoing exercise, not just a one-off tick box exercise. And we need to expect that consultation has to be meaningful. It's not just about informing you of what they're teaching, but also asking for your views and taking some of your views into account and making changes where appropriate. Now, how have you taken into account the religious background of my children when planning teaching? Now, the guidance says that when the schools are planning teaching and choosing resources, they need to take into account two things. One is the age of the children, and the other is the religious background of pupils. So we need to take those two into account. So when you ask a school, how have you taken into account the religious background of my children when planning teaching? Most schools will say, what? Why does that matter? And so almost we've got to educate teachers and schools about their responsibilities, because schools are not really fulfilling that. They're very much focused on what the latest bandwagon suggests they should be doing, and they're not really thinking about, like, there could be schools with 80-90% Muslim children, and you ask them, how have you taken into account the religious background of my children? They say, we haven't. That's unacceptable. Please show me all the resources you'll be teaching. You have an absolute right as a parent to be shown all the resources a school is planning to teach your children, and not just in your year group. You could say, I want to see all the resources for all the year groups, not just my child's year group, because you need to get an idea of what they're teaching across year groups, not just in your child's year group. And the government recently, about 6 months ago, wrote to all schools to say, if a parent asks to see the resources of your child's school, you have to show it to them. There's no reason why you can't show it to them. And so we've got that behind us. We need to actually make sure that if schools say, no, I can't show you the resources, we say that's not legally allowed. You have to show the resources. And can you name or inform me of the name of any external organizations that support RSE teaching in a school? A lot of problems are happening in schools because they're bringing in outside speakers. This is mainly secondary schools rather than primary schools, but it's always important to ask the question because they may be doing it in primary schools as well. But a lot of the problems happening in secondary schools are when they bring in an outside speaker who says, look, my name is Abdul. Yeah, I was born into a Muslim family. I've read the Quran. The Quran has no problem with same-sex relationships. You can be gay and Muslim. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's where problems occur. And obviously, because that person is not an expert in Islam, he shouldn't be speaking about what Islam says or doesn't say. And obviously, this goes against what is the clear and fixed rule in Islam that sexual relationships that happen outside of a marriage between a man and a woman are completely haram, and there's no acceptance of any relationship outside of a relationship through nikah between a man and a woman. So we've got to push back against this. But I think asking questions to a school, and these are just some example questions that I've written down. Also, one final thing is when you ask questions, try and ask questions in writing. Yeah, ask questions in writing because sometimes you can get a better response or a more formal response if you do it in writing. Yeah, obviously, if you're asking, even if you want to ask to see the resources, if a school says no, it's better to get that in writing than just verbally, because you might say later on, I asked the school, they refused, and the school might say, no, we didn't refuse. And so you need to have like an audit trail of the conversation between you and the school that you can always come back to and say, this is what you said to me. And if you want to escalate that complaint in the future, you've got a written conversation to do that, inshallah. So that's really all I wanted to cover today, because I know we've only got about 45 minutes, and now we want to have some questions. So there's plenty more to discuss. I could speak about this for hours and bore you with all the discussions that we can go through. But I think it's really important that we start to discuss. We start to get some questions from you as well, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Ustad. That was extremely enlightening. I myself picked up lots of points, and I'm sure the panelists, the attendees will have lots of questions to ask as well. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves, if Ustad would be kind enough to take the questions that way, or whether you want to take it from the chat boxes. I think we may have time to take about 3 or 4 questions. If people could just raise their hands and just unmute themselves and put their questions forward. Thank you. So while we're waiting for, I can just ask Sheikh one question. Is this like a topic that big and important? Because many people are taking the step of homeschooling their children based on this very reason itself. So what are your views on this?
Yeah, I think in terms of home educating children is a good option, but the reality is, my wife actually home educates our children. We've educated our children from when they were first of school age. But what I would say to you is the reason why this discussion is important is because, and it shouldn't be just about our children, because we can make decisions for our children, it's absolutely fine, but actually we have a greater responsibility towards our community, because in essence, if 97% of the children, Muslim children, the next generation of our community, go to state schools, then this is a battle that we need to be a part of, because we all have a vested interest in ensuring that our community lives by Islam, recognizes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as our Rabb, our Lord, worships him, and really are outwardly and inwardly people who live by the guidance of Islam. And so that I think it's an important issue, because it's about the next generation of Muslims rather than just our own children. But every parent has to take the best decision that they have to take for their own children, and that means either take them to a state school with their eyes wide open, or a Muslim school still with their eyes wide open, or home educating their children, and those 3 options are open to everybody. But we got to decide on what's best for our own families. But if we do whatever decision we take, we need to understand the consequences, implications, the pros and cons, and make that decision in that fashion.
Jazakallah khair.
Sorry.
Go ahead, inshallah.
Can I ask? Okay, sorry. Yeah, Jazakallah khair for this lecture. Just I have a question. You told us that we have to we have to review the resources. For example, if I found something, it's not suitable. So, when I ask the school, I don't want my child to be educated this topic. So what they will do, they will give you the schedule, but they will not tell you which date. The whole week they will teach different topics, and this topic particularly, they will not tell you in a specific day, which day. So I have the right to let them absent for the whole week if they will not inform me about which day they will teach this subject.
I think when you're reviewing the resources and saying that something's not appropriate, it's not about you then withdrawing your child from that day which they're teaching that. It's about you changing that and actually stopping them from teaching that to all children. So when you're saying, look, this is inappropriate, you're not saying it's inappropriate for my child. You're saying it's inappropriate for all children. So if they're using a explicit resource, if they're promoting LGBTQ values in a way which goes beyond what is educationally allowed, what's factually allowed, then you say this is not appropriate for all children at this age, yeah? And so you're actually pushing for something more than just protection of your children. You're pushing for something that will stop something that will affect other children. So I think that should be that should be the focus of what we want to change. It's not just about I want to find out if they're doing it on a Tuesday. If they're doing it on a Tuesday, then I'm gonna make sure my child doesn't attend on a Tuesday. We've got a greater responsibility for all children rather than just our own children in this issue.
Okay, so what's the best attitude at that time? What they have to do? Because they will give you, for example, 6 topics. 5 of them it's okay, but one of them it's very critical. So I have to inform them that I don't want my child to be educated this. So what the best way I have to approach this? And
but I think when you say topics, you need to be much more specific than that in terms of if it's a statutory requirement a school has to teach about, for example, different types of families, and you say I don't want them to know about different types of families, then you can't stop them from teaching that. But if you say to them, for example, you're under different types of families, you're talking about families with 2 fathers and 2 mothers, and you're overemphasizing that one family structure over everything else, that's not appropriate. That's indoctrination. That's not education. And I don't think children at that age should understand or should be subjected to a discussion about family structures that are based upon sexual relationships between a man and a man, or woman and a woman. Then you can start arguing that case that's not appropriate. But if for example, a school says that we're gonna say that a man is allowed to marry a man and a woman is allowed to marry a woman, you can't argue against that because that's legally required. That's a legal allowance for a man to marry a man and a woman to marry a woman. But I think it's about having a discussion with the school and talking to them about what's appropriate, asking them to either change a particular set of resources, like a small aspect of resources that you think is inappropriate, or moving a discussion that they're having in year 1 to year 3, or to a later year group when you think that they are much more able to digest and understand this complex, almost adult topic in a later year group rather than earlier year group.
But I have already explained to them last year. I surprised what today you are saying. Some topics it's not legal to educate. They said it's compulsory. You don't have to make any objection about that. So we have to teach them, and they will not tell you which day they will teach. I already informed them. We discussed them, and
but you probably discussed verbally, isn't it? You probably discussed it verbally. That's not going to achieve it. You need to talk. You need to write formal questions to them via email and ask them to respond. If you say statutory, where is it statutory? Where is it statutory that you have to teach this part of year 1? Where is it statutory you have to teach this particular resource? Now, saying it's statutory is not accurate. What is statutory are the learning outcomes of the curriculum that they have to teach in primary schools and secondary schools. But what is not statutory is a particular resource or a particular teach it in a particular year group. So we've got to get them to say, actually, where is this requirement? You are teaching it in this particular year group because you have decided that's best for my child. But actually, where have you consulted parents about that? Was there any consultation with parents before you started to implement this subject in school? And if you haven't done that, you have to do that because this is legally required. I think we need to move on to other questions as well because we've only got 6 minutes left. But inshallah, you can always contact me later to ask for additional information and support, inshallah.
Okay, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Exactly.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam. Please go ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
I am a teaching assistant in the same school of my girls, so I have little concerns about the things what's going on. And before summer holidays, I asked the head of the school that I want to exempt my child from the RSE and everything, and she was agreed. And she said, yes, you are allowed, you can do it. And she said they're gonna do the consultation in September, and before consultation, they are not until the consultation done. They are not going to teach anything to the children in school. And the thing is, I'm just asking that if I wrote to them, because I'm the staff in the same school, so I just need to ask that if am I going to write them the formal emails, or what should I do then? Because I got everything like I am a RSE champions active as well in a group, Yusuf Brothers WhatsApp group as well. So I have trained every module of yours, and yeah, that's what my worry is. If I wrote to them, shall I make it formal or just the normal talk to them, or what can I do for it?
So I think, are you saying that you said there's going to be a consultation in this month in September, yes?
Yeah.
So you just take part in the consultation as any other parent does. Now you are approaching the school not as a teaching assistant. You're approaching the school as a parent of a child at that school. Now I think the thing is that and some people mentioned it in the chat before. By engaging in this conversation with school, we're not doing it in a way that we want conflict, or we want to create an argument, or we want to almost challenge the school like in a way that is that doesn't achieve our result. We're just trying to engage in a process as a concerned parent, and we're expecting a school to respond in a way which is collaborative. Yeah, is responding that we want to work together in partnership. So in terms of, all you've got to do is take part in that consultation process as any other parent would, and usually consultation processes, they ask for your feedback, and that's usually written feedback. It depends if they're asking for verbal feedback or written feedback, but just use the feedback mechanisms that they have included, and ask them. Okay, when I raise my not concerns, when I give my feedback, how will all the feedback be collated and then lead to either changes being made or lead to changes being made in the school? So how does my feedback, or the feedback of all parents, lead to some changes being made to what you're planning to teach? And they say, no, we're not planning to make any changes, then that's not a real process. But it's just about giving your views and getting them to make the appropriate changes to the things that you think are either too early for your children, or they're using inappropriate resources, or the resources are not are almost pushing the LGBTQ narrative in a way which is unreasonable, or it goes beyond educational resources and going into indoctrination. So I think those are the things that you need to look at and just give your feedback, and make sure that the school listens, is taking your feedback and making appropriate changes during that process in a meaningful way.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair.
Okay.
Jazakallah.
Dr. Shai, do we have time for other questions, or is there something else that you want to discuss before the end? Because we've got 1 minute left, I think.
Yeah, I think we are almost 1 minute away from time. So I actually think we should start wrapping it up. And just a key point for all the participants is that this is actually just an introductory talk. Essentially, there's a whole course on this, which is what we are going to just talk about. So I'll just say a big thank you, Jazakallah khair, Ustad. You have given us lots of gems. I mean, so many things in a very succinct manner. And I'm sure in the upcoming course, we will be dissecting out all this thing a lot more detail. And I can reassure the participants, Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah for attending and for all the attention. Inshallah, in the course spread out over the next few weeks, the details of which will be coming up soon. It's designed for concerned Muslim parents, and we will be giving, today there's a special announcement that we'll be making, that for all the webinar attendees, there's the exclusive opportunity to get a 40% discount on the course, and the link will be, or has already probably been put up in the chat section. And this is the course that is LGBT and relationships and sex education, the Islamic approach. So this course will aim to offer knowledge, guidance, tools to navigate the complexities of these issues while adhering to Islamic principles, and will learn how to initiate and maintain open and age-appropriate Islamically grounded conversations with the children about sex and relationships, and promoting a healthy understanding within the Islamic framework. And there'll be multiple modules about how to respond to these in greater detail, understanding the legal and regulatory compliance for the RSE, which Sheikh has already touched upon, and also knowing about our legal rights in both the primary and the secondary schools. And most importantly, with the children, how we build up their foundational strength, the Iman, nurturing the emotional resilience in children, and with an Islamic perspective, because this problem is not going to go away. Like, this is something which we will have to keep on sort of challenging and working with it, because we have to get through our lives in an appropriate way, and how to discuss all these intimate issues with our children as well, and give us greater confidence as parents, to equip us with all these tools. So inshallah, you'll find the link in the chat section. So please do sign up. I would strongly recommend. Inshallah, it'll be very, very beneficial. And finally, as we had mentioned prior in the beginning, we will be having another nasheed by Brother Kabir Omar, Subhanallah. And we'll inshallah play it for it right now, and then we will close up the webinar for today, inshallah. So Brother Kabir.
More than gold, more rewards from the Lord of all. Simple words, so much love from the one who loves us all. Oh, let every breath that I take be a praise to your name. Let every step that I make be an effort to your praise. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-azim. Glory, praises to him. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-azim. Glory, praises to him. Subhanallah. Light up my face, light up my heart. Words of praises to Allah. Every day, every night, let this word fill my heart. Let every breath that I take be a praise to your name. Oh, let every step that I make be an effort to your praise. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-azim. We praises to him. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-azim. Glory, praises to him. Let every breath I take before your praise, saying these words always, make me fortunate to praise your name. Saying these words always, Subhanallah wa bihamdih, wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-azim. Glory, praises to him. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-azim. Glory, praises to him. Subhanallah. Praise your name. Praise your name. Subhanallah al-azim. Glory, praises to him. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-azim. Glory, praises to him. Subhanallah.
So Jazakumullah khair, mashallah. May Allah Ta'ala bring peace and serenity to our hearts, and may Allah help us all improve our connection with him, and help us navigate this life with our challenges that we are facing, alhamdulillah. So please absolutely look up the website, and alhamdulillah, it's a very good design course. If you can look up the modules in the thing, the sessions we'll be covering things like the history of LGBT liberalism, feminism, the Islamic rulings, how to respond, empowering families, the importance of the holy bond of nikah in Islam, the parents' legal rights, building foundational strength, emotional resilience, how to discuss things with children, the fiqh of gender change, the importance of nikah and lineage, so many things, navigating the gender confusion and Islamic counseling and the spiritual approach. So it looks like a very, very rich course, inshallah. I'm quite looking forward to that. So Jazakallah khair, Ustad, once again, and Jazakallah khair to all the esteemed attendees. And may Allah Ta'ala bless our efforts. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa barik wa sallim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.